Right, what I'm working on at the moment is the next little stage of neck carving. It's one of the early stages, not anywhere near the final shape, but it's rough shaping these transitions. What I've done is I've started with a square shaped neck blank that's, you know, neck shaped from the front but square on the back. So the first thing I do is I take a bit of the meat off the back with a round over bit on the pin router. I have a jig that does that, and once I've done that, I like to just rough carve these transitions here at the heel and the headstock. I also have to remove these little nibs here, which are sort of an artifact from the neck machining. This neck here gets machined in one process and the headstock gets machined in another, and you get these little nibs here which need to be cleaned off and blended in. So I do that so I can effectively give the truss rod an easier time, because the next major task I'm aiming for is rounding over the fingerboard, which I do on my swing sander, which before I do that job, I like to put a bit of tension in the truss rod to introduce a little bit of a back bow into the neck, so that when I radius it true, I've then got a little bit of extra adjustability. The neck, I'll start with a little bit of back bow, then I true it up, and then when I let the truss rod off, it will let the neck come forward ever so slightly, and that gives me effectively a little bit of two-way adjustability on the truss rod further down the line. So if the neck's a bit stiff and the string tension won't pull it into relief enough, I can let the rod off a little bit and just get a little bit more relief. So in order to give the truss rod an easier time, I need to get a bit of this meat off the neck before I do the radiusing stage. So having rounded this over, I just rough shape these transitions, and then if the rod works okay, then that's fine. If not, then I'll just take a little bit more meat off, and we'll be ready to go. So first thing to do, take these nibs off here. I like to, at the same time, just change the angle of this shape here. I like to square that up so that's sort of perpendicular to the neck rather than at an angle. Looks a little bit nicer, I think. So I do this first, then that's to side, then I'll mark out the transitions here, mark out this here, and carve it away. So let's get it clamped up and make a start. I put a bit of tape over the edge of the binding just to protect it should I slip. Now, first thing I do is clamp it on here onto my little neck carving attachment, like that. Then the aim here is to carve away this little nib and also change the angle of this. This looks a little bit clumsy, so that rather than being angled there, is angled perpendicular to the fingerboard. So first thing I'll do is put a little bit of tape over the edge of the binding, because of course that will get cleaned up a little more. I don't want to put big gouges in it with a rasp, so I'll put a little bit of tape over there just to protect that. Then the majority of this I do with a rasp, a little 13 grain Model Maker's rasp, which is a wonderful tool and perfect for this. So we'll start with that. I'll need to change round in a minute, so any second now you'll be looking at this from the other side. Right, let's do that. Let's work away at that till it's somewhere near. So I'm just starting to take that tape off there, so I'm pretty close. So just eye that in, just to, that's a little bit flat, just through there. It's not got a nice curve, so I'll just take a little bit more off of there. Put almost no pressure on the rasp, just let it rest and just move it backwards and forwards gently. I suspect is pretty close. Yeah, that's very good. So now it just needs a little bit of clean up. So we can take the tape off of there, and I clean that up with a piece of, let's see if I can, no. Oh, that's sharp enough, that'll be all right. Just a bit of dowel with a bit of 120 sandpaper stuck to it. So I can just, again, you have to be a little bit careful not to scratch the binding up too much, but I can line the edge of the paper up with the edge of the binding just by varying how much pressure I put on. I can take wood off where I want to. I think that's pretty close. Let's check that. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. So this is not the final job, because this will all be carved in here and shaped. So we're 99% of the way there with that. So that's good. I'll just give, because I'm peculiar about these things, I'll just give it another little clean up with a little bit of tiny sanding pad, a little cork, flexible bit of cork with a bit of, I think that's probably 220 on there, and that'll do. That's so I can stand to look at it for the moment, because I hate to see things that look scratchy and ugly. So now the next little thing here is to just square this up here. Now, which side will I do that from? I'll do that from the other side. I think that's better, yes. So first thing I need to do is move around there. So what I'm doing here is essentially removing a little bit of material just through here, just so that this, I'm changing the angle of this curve here from like that to like that. So you can see if I put the rasp there, it's touching all the way across. If I put it there, there's a gap, so I just need to remove some material here. So let's make a start with that. And as long as I keep the rasp perpendicular to the fingerboard, we'll keep working away. And you can see where I've removed wood just through here, but a little bit less here, until that line there between where I've taken wood off and where I haven't will come very close to the top face of the headstock, and then we'll know we're there. Now, and this will all be carved in, and a bit more will be taken off. There, that's pretty close, I think. So that's good, looks good to me. A little bit more off of there. There we go. So again, onto the sanding block. Yeah, I think I want a little bit more off of there. There we go. There we go. That's pretty close. So just need to, at that stage, just fair that top edge in a little bit, which I'll do with a flat block. There, that's all right for now. It will get reworked a little bit, but that looks good on the back. There we are, that's that. So now we have that radius, instead of being at the angle of the headstock, is at the angle of the neck shaft, which looks a lot nicer. There we go. So that's the first step. So onwards to the next step, which is, so we'll get that off there, carving this transition in roughly. So before I do that, I just need to mark it out. So let's just position this on here. Right, first thing I'll do is just mark the centre line. I happen to have a couple of lines on here from previous processes, so I'll just measure across there and get a rough centre line, which is about there. I don't need to be super precise at this point, but we'll be close enough. There we go, it's a centre line. And then using a French curve, just need to move that temporarily, I can just mark a line on there from that point there, and that point about there where that radius ends. This is just a guide at this point, just to let you know where I am. one day I'll make a template for this, but it doesn't take long to do it like this. So about there to about there looks all right. That's it. That's just a rough guideline, so I know not to go beyond it. All of this will get recarved and shaped as the neck gets carved further. But that's just to stop me hacking away blindly and making a complete Horlicks of the deal at this stage. So there we go. Right, that's that. So I like to take the meat of this off using a little whittling knife or carving knife, which seems to work quite well, particularly on softer woods like this. Works on maple as well, but you have to be a little bit slower. So I work slowly with this because you're never sure when you've got a little bit of grain that's working against you, and I tend to sort of don't go along the grain only, trying to work sort of sideways, so you're paring it off as you go. And I'm just really carving this in roughly just down to the radius that we've got on the shaft of the neck. And that'll do for now. Then I can, from there on, get to the rasp again. Same rasp that I used before. Don't need to be very particular at this stage. There's a lot more going to come off here in further stages, but that's enough for now. So let's do the other side. There we go. At this stage, I could carve it further, and I might, but at this stage, really all I'm doing is getting a bit of stiffness out of the neck to allow the truss rod an easier time, so I can put that little bit of back bow into the neck before I radius the fingerboard. It just helps give the truss rod an easier time, saves me having to crank the truss rod off to put the neck into a little bit of back bow. So I'm just taking a little bit off, and if the truss rod's not doing quite what I want it to do at this stage because the neck is too stiff, I will take a little bit more off. But I don't like to do the final stage of carving until I've got the fingerboard radius. But again, the fingerboard, when I radius the fingerboard, it won't be the final stage. What happens essentially from here is I partly carve the neck so that the truss rod will work. Then once the truss rod is working, I can put the neck into a bit of a back bow. I then radius the fingerboard, but then that's not the very final truing up of the fingerboard. I'll then carve the neck so it's a tiny fraction oversize, so all but a few fractions of a millimeter. Then I'll go back to the fingerboard and finally true up the fingerboard, because at every stage you remove wood, things can move. So then the fingerboard is true, and by then it's just a final sanding of the neck, and we've got a neck to exactly the right size that we want, and the fingerboard is true, and everything is stable and nothing is going to move. So it's, you know, you do a bit of this and a bit of that. So you do a bit of one, a bit of the other. So at this stage, I might take a bit more off this. I might not, but I just need to get these transitions carved. Then I can try the truss rod, see how it's working, and go from there. So that's this side. That's the headstock done, roughly. The next stage is to carve the transitions of the heel, which is a similar process. I've already marked this. I've got a mark here. That's where the neck joint will be. That line there, and that's the shape of the heel that I want. So I can just carve this in roughly between here and there. So same process as before. This is where you need to be the most careful if you're doing any of this with a knife, is that this, you know, you see like that, it lifted a little bit out, but I mean that's really not a problem at this stage. There's so much more to come off, but that's not an issue. But if I was closer to the final size, I'd have to be even more careful, or probably not use the knife at all. But we're quite a lot oversized at this stage, so that's not an issue. Here, where you're slicing down through the grain, it's much less of an issue. Yeah, that's close. So then we're back to the rasp. Let's try the big rasp this time, which is slightly overkill for this stage, but this will really rip through the timber. I don't need any more with that one. I could have done all of this with a rasp, really, but the knife is it's an enjoyable way to do it with a knife, and quick as well. So there we go. That's that side. Now I'll do this side. Yeah. There, that's roughly done. So I'll just give that a quick clean up, because I can find a little bit of, there we go. There we go. This is 80 grit paper on a flexible tape, which is a really useful thing for this sort of shaping work. I don't need to sand it at this stage, but you know, I just kind of like things to look neater, so we'll give that end a little clean up as well. There we go. That's it. So that's that. The little nibs removed from there, and that shape all blended in nicely. And the neck's now very, very roughly shaped oversize. So what I'll do now is I'll try the truss rod, see where we go. If it's still a little stiff, I'll carve a little bit more off. And get it to the stage where the truss rod's working how I like it, Not that it won't work, I just don't want it to work too hard at this stage with the neck being so thick. And once we're there, we can get on to radiusing the fingerboard, which will hopefully do that in a day or so. So, more soon.